Well, the rich get richer. Kirby Smart, Mike Bobo, the Georgia Bulldogs have landed number one overall prospect and five-star quarterback Dylan Raiola. We're going to examine how this can impact college football going forward. And did Georgia just take another step towards being the premier dynasty in college football? A lot to unpack here, and we'll do it here on Southeastern 14. Hello, everyone. I'm Blayne Gilmer. Welcome to Southeastern 14. The commitment of Dylan Raiola to Georgia is something that people have kind of been expecting for a while now, but it just sent shockwaves and reverberations around college football and social media yesterday. It's always a big deal when you get a five-star commit to your program, but for Georgia and Kirby Smart, a quarterback of this caliber is something that they are really welcoming in, especially after the whole saga that happened with the Jake Fromm and Justin Fields deal, how that went down. So there is a lot on the line, not only for this young man from Arizona that has made his decision to come to the University of Georgia, but also for the head coach Kirby Smart, the offensive coordinator Mike Bobo. There's a lot that people still like to throw up about Georgia. Well, you won those with Stetson Bennett. It's kind of a feel-good story, all that kind of stuff. There's two ways to look at that, okay? There's two ways to look at it. Yes, Georgia had generationally talented defense those 2 years. You see that by what has been put into the NFL out of that 2021 and 2022 defense for Georgia. But if people examine the recruiting job that Kirby Smart and his staff have done, it's not like that level of defense is going away anytime soon. And the reason this can be so impactful with Dylan Raiola, and by the way, they also have another quarterback committed in the class of 2024, Ryan Puglisi, because there's a very good chance that after this year, Carson Beck goes pro, and then one of the two quarterbacks of Brock Vandagriff and Gunnar Stockton transfer. Oh, by the way, both of those guys, depending on which recruiting service you looked at, former five-star prospects themselves. So in the past, what you've had come through, Jacob Eason was a five-star that committed to Georgia under Mark Richt and stayed when Kirby Smart came aboard. He ended up being the starter Kirby's first season. Year two, he comes in, a lot of hype and excitement around him. App State game, goes down with an ankle. He gets Wally pipped by Jake Fromm. Jake Fromm, as a freshman, takes Georgia to the national championship. And in that year, that while that's going on, Justin Fields commits to Georgia, comes in the next year, and we all know it leads to the fake punt situation against Alabama, all that, and then he's gone out of the program. So that was a tough spot in terms of Kirby Smart, because what would you do if you had Justin Fields come into your program and you had Jake Fromm, who, by the way, five-star at every recruiting service when he came into Georgia, that had just led you to a national championship? Would you be very quick to pull the trigger on replacing Jake Fromm, especially when reports were coming out that Justin Fields wasn't grasping the offense as quickly as Jake Fromm? Interesting debate. It's always going to be something that people are going to talk about in Georgia circles and around the SEC and things like that. Ohio State fans always bring it up as well with what Fields went on to accomplish at Ohio State and in the NFL. Now, fast forward a little bit, and here you have Dylan Raiola and people online making memes about all those five-star quarterbacks and all that kind of stuff. That's why will this be any different? Well, if you go back and look when Eason and Fromm and Fields came aboard, and even a couple of years ago when Brock Vandagriff came aboard, those rosters that they were coming into were not as complete as what this roster is now when you're talking about Georgia. You're talking about multiple receivers, and I'm talking a handful of receivers and defensive backs that are 10-2 in the 100-meter and track and under. There is so much speed on this Georgia team now that it is going to naturally just create a, I guess, more conducive environment for a quarterback to grow in, whether that's Puglisi or whether that's Raiola. But with what is exiting from Georgia's program after this season, they desperately needed 2 quality quarterbacks. They go out and get the top one in the country and one of the fastest rising ones in the country in Ryan Puglisi. So that is a huge impact in itself. But where it's really going to propel Georgia forward, and tell me if you've heard this before, this blueprint before: win sooner than expected with hard-nosed defense, a good running game, and really good offensive line, then start winning multiple championships with that format, and then transform your offense into a juggernaut with 5-star receivers and 5-star quarterback prospects. Does that sound familiar? Because that's exactly what Nick Saban did at Alabama. The way he won those first couple of championships, have a guy like A.J. McCarron, winning with the running game, all that kind of stuff. And then in 2014, 2015, Lane Kiffin comes aboard and totally changes how that offense plays, because Nick Saban thought that they needed to develop offensively. All the rules in college football and everything were favoring the offense. He said, hey, if you want to do this, then we're gonna do this. And Alabama became the offensive power in college football with a unprecedented group of wide receivers that all played there at the same time, loaded with quarterbacks in that room. There you see Nick Saban right there. He totally changed how it's done. Kirby Smart's doing the same thing, stockpiling unbelievably talented quarterbacks, convincing them that they'll bide their time, wait their turn, a la Mac Jones. Guys like Jalen Hurts, who played, and then Tua waited his time and he got his chance. He come in. Georgia's trying to do the same thing in that manner, and they're doing it with guys like Dylan Raiola, who are going to attract top profile wide receivers. Just this weekend, Jeremiah Smith, the number 1 receiver in the country who is committed to Ohio State, is going to be visiting Georgia the same weekend as Dylan Raiola. So it's just opening doors there. Ryan Wingo, another 5-star wide receiver, is a guy that Georgia is targeting that is out there. So there is going to be a lot of buzz and reaction, and rightfully so, just in Raiola committing to Georgia in its own right. But when you add what could be brought in at the wide receiver position, something that Georgia has lacked at, quite frankly, compared to the rest of college football. They've got it done with running backs and tight end and a great offensive line, and kind of that plucky feel-good story there of Stetson Bennett, who goes from former walk-on all the way to Heisman Trophy finalist. There is a lot of still left out there for people to accomplish in terms of individual awards and statistics and things like that at the University of Georgia offensively. We all know, if you look back to Aaron Murray's time, Matt Stafford's time at the University of Georgia under Mike Bobo as offensive coordinator, we all know that Mike Bobo, when he has a quarterback that he believes in, wants to sling the football around. Just until recently, Aaron Murray still held all the SEC passing records and passing touchdown records and things of that nature, until guys like Bryce Young and Tua Tagovailoa and all those guys came about and broke those records. But it's not as if Georgia is not going to want to throw the football, especially when they have explosive athletes on the outside. Arian Smith, for one, in 2023 here for Georgia, he runs a 10-100 meter and is one of the fastest guys in all of college football. They've added Dominic Lovett from Missouri, a transfer that is one of the most dynamic receivers that Georgia's had since Mecole Hardman or Isaiah McKenzie in terms of a slot guy. And of course, Ladd McConkey's been productive, and we all know what Brock Bowers is. So the offensive tide has already begun to shift a little bit under Todd Monken in terms of the run pass percentages and ratio, things of that nature, I think you're going to see Georgia continue to put a priority on run the football, but Mike Bobo now is going to be able to amass wide receiver talent to go with these unbelievable talented young quarterbacks that are going to be coming in, and it takes Georgia a step closer because realistically they're going to be the favorite to win a third straight national championship. They're the Vegas odds favorite right now as we record this on May 16th. Georgia wins a third national championship in a row when they're transitioning from Stetson Bennett to Carson Beck. It's quite realistic that that young man right there that just committed, Dylan Raiola, could end up being the starting quarterback in the 2024 season that fall with a ridiculously talented roster around him. The defensive class that Georgia brought in last year with guys like Raylan Wilson, with guys like C.J. Allen at linebacker, they continue to load up at that position. It is going to be quite interesting to see how this one plays out. There's been lots of, like I said, QB questions and drama and all that kind of stuff in the past, but now Kirby Smart and the Georgia staff have back-to-back national championships to their credit to, and a roster that has never been this complete before when adding these kinds of quarterbacks. I think it's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out, especially when we're going to the expanded college football playoff. And you would think with 12 teams getting in, it only is going to ensure that Georgia makes the field more and more over the next 2 to 5, 6 years, however long this recruiting run goes right now with what Kirby Smart is stacking up. So interesting stuff. We'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Comment. We'll be doing SEC football coverage all throughout the offseason here. And Chris Lee, Blake Lovell, they do a great job on this channel covering baseball and basketball. They're going to join me for football sooner rather than later. So I am Blayne Gilmer for Southeastern 14. Thank you guys for joining. We'll catch you next time.